It is time to bring back the Gipper and the Iron Lady. If Harvard professor Niall Ferguson had his way, that's what the U.S. would be doing right now, looking to the Reagan and Thatcher governments of the 1980s for inspiration in implementing policy that promotes business confidence as the way out of the economic slump. We've heard the latest from the Obama administration this week, and we're going to be hearing more from David Axelrod this morning. But right now, it's the professor's turn. Niall Ferguson is the Tisch Professor of History at Harvard and the author of many books, including The Ascent of Money, and most recently, High Financier, The Lives and Time of Sigmund Warburg. Niall is here with me right now. Niall, let's start with this. Tax breaks for business investment. That's what we're hearing from the administration. We're going to get more from it from David Axelrod in just a few minutes. And infrastructure spending. Now, take us back to previous challenges that governments like that of Reagan and Thatcher have faced. Is this what they'd be doing? And more importantly, to your point about business confidence, is it enough?
Well, I think it's good that we're now talking more about tax cuts and preserving tax cuts, not raising taxes, rather than dreaming of yet larger stimulus packages. So I have a sense that over the summer, some reality has set in the minds of people taking decisions in Washington about the economy. But if you think back to the late 70s, which was another time of great economic crisis, though the crisis then was an inflationary one, not a deflationary one, the critical thing that both Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan did was to change the game so that confidence returned to business. And that need to change the game seems to me crucial at a time when business on both sides of the Atlantic is very, very hesitant about new investment, about new hiring, and there's a great mood of anxiety, including anxiety among many strong supporters, at least former strong supporters of President Obama. So I do think confidence is crucial here, and the administration has to do an awful lot more between now and November to bring that confidence back.
Niall, echoes in your comments right there of an op-ed you had in the FT a few months back in July. At the time, you said the Keynesians, embodied perhaps by the current administration, hadn't learned anything since 1935. In the few months since then, have they?
Well, some, I think, are learning, and others cling to, John Maynard Keynes's relatively simple model of how you bring an economy back. The argument that I've tried to make consistently now for, nearly 2 years is that under conditions of excessive private sector leverage, it's unlikely that a great splurge of public sector borrowing is going to bring about recovery. Keynesian policies can work under certain very specific conditions, but we have a very open economy, so there's a lot of leakage if the government does stimulus. And we also have the problem that with a very rapid build-up of debt, even with low interest rates, you can see interest payments on the federal debt begin to consume a larger and larger share of tax dollars. The US is in the grip of a structural crisis of public finance, and adding on Keynesian stimulus has actually made that crisis worse. Right now, I still don't see a sign that the administration has a credible plan to get back on track, by which I mean to tell us how in the next 5 or 10 years the United States is going to get back to fiscal equilibrium, back to a balanced budget.
Okay, but you can only balance the budget two ways. You can either cut spending or raise revenue. On the one hand, you want to see spending, taxes at least remain low as opposed to raised. What are the chances, though, that we're going to get a credible plan from the administration on spending cuts, which is the only other way, with 2 months, a little more than 2 months left before the midterms?
Well, is there anything lower than a 0% probability? I mean, it's politically almost inconceivable, and yet from an economic point of view, it's really desperately needed. There are huge question marks over the credibility of US fiscal policy. Morgan Stanley did a report just the other day which reiterated a point I've been making for ages, that the situation in the US fiscally is actually worse than the situation in Greece. There's this huge overhang of debt and a very narrow tax base and a relatively slow-growing economy. The key to getting back to equilibrium is, of course, growth, which you didn't mention. If you get the fiscal mix right, if you get the right kind of cuts in entitlements, then you take away this fear that the United States is on track to be a kind of super Greece at some point in the next few years. And that is the thing that I'll be looking for. I don't think it's politically unpopular for somebody to say, whether they're a Democrat or a Republican, look, I'm serious about getting this deficit under control. I want to do something about this crisis. When someone like Paul Ryan says it, and I think he embodies a new spirit among younger Republicans to get serious about this issue, people listen, and the polls show that voters take it seriously. So I think that we've got to get away from the idea that talking seriously about reforming Medicare and Social Security is like grabbing the third rail of American politics. I think that's got to change.